Show. Clash momentarily for clash solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Const. It is Friday, March 25th. It is Femme Friday, and I think you can probably tell at this point that my voice is a little shot. So as a result, I am not going to do a monologue today. I am going to really just take it easy, nice and slow this weekend. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to provide some content for you guys. We have a really great interview today. We are very excited. I've been looking forward to this. There's a new series out in the Intercept by investigative reporter Sharon Lerner. She has uncovered a lot about the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and you can check out her series in the Intercept right now, where she was able to be in touch with some whistleblowers who spoke out about the EPA's practice of, quote, routinely approving dangerous chemicals. That is the focus of today. We're going to keep it kind of simple just because of my voice. So we appreciate you all. I'll be doing some shout outs next week and we're going to be back to business. But, in order for us to have a show next week, I gotta nurture this. This is very important. I was thinking about so was I talking more than normal? But I don't know, I guess just because I was on the road. And most of the time when I'm doing the documentary, I'm interviewing people. So other people are talking. So I don't really know what's going on. But with that, I am very excited to welcome Sharon Lerner to the show. That is the focus of today. We're going to keep it kind of simple just because of my voice. So we appreciate you all. So I did not sleep well last night. Hate to break it to everyone. That's why I'm looking a little pale today. I didn't sleep well last night because my Twitter alerts were waking me up. I'll just leave that there. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But, luckily I was able to eventually get to sleep and get a couple of hours of shut-eye because I use Sunset Lake CBD. Sunset Lake CBD has been my go-to sleep aid for a bit now. Basically, I learned about them from Sam Cedar. Sam Cedar was raving about CBD. I was like, I think it's a scam because I had tried some, from some like bodega that I spent $100 on. And he's like, no, you got to try Sunset Lake. And then I did, and he was right. It really, really helped. I started with the gummies. I then got addicted to the gummies. So now I've weaned off the gummies, but you should definitely try the gummies. But I use the CBD oil. I drop a little bit in my water or my tea at night. The CBD oil now comes with melatonin, so it'll help you go to sleep and stay asleep. The CBD helps you stay asleep. Unfortunately, I didn't do that at the beginning of the night. I had to do it midway through the night around 5 o'clock in the morning, which is real fun. But luckily, I have the product. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont that used to be a dairy farm, a Ben & Jerry's dairy farm. They decided to diversify it, and now they grow premium hemp, and they send it right from their farm to your door. They take care of their workers. And when you take care of them, they're supporting and enhancing their rural economy because rural economies, unfortunately, are not supported, as we know. But Sunset Lake CBD is doing everything they can to make sure that the community that they support in Vermont is completely supported through having a $15 minimum wage, having their employees own the majority of their company. And then on top of that all, they give back to independent shows like ours and the David Pakman Show. And of course, the Majority Report. You can go to sunsetlakecbd.com today and you will get 20% off of your order. If you type in Nomi, N-O-M-I, go to sunsetlakecbd.com, type in Nomi, and they've got all sorts of new products right now out there. I've been hearing from folks who like the dog biscuits. I think it's something that if you've had small dogs in particular, they get really a lot of anxiety when you leave. And the dog biscuits help. They're also full of it's purely like natural ingredients. I think you can eat the dog biscuits if you want to. I think Sam Cedar may have at one point, but it totally chills out your dog if they get a lot of anxiety. Mine gets anxiety. He starts chewing on his. Oh, it's so sad. He chews on his own skin, and then he has to wear the little cone for a long time because he just does it. But the CBD has definitely helped him, and I know it's helped other people as well. Go to sunsetlakecbd.com, type in Nomi, Nomi, and you will get 20% off of your entire order. And check out all the other sales. They have a ton of sales all the time with lots of interesting products. Go check it out, sunsetlakecbd.com. Excited to welcome Sharon Lerner to the show. Is Sharon ready?
I am. Hi.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I apologize for my voice. I'm trying all I can. So this is really fascinating. I'm curious, how did this come about? Did a whistleblower come to you?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me on. This goes back almost a year ago. I have been doing this series since July. But the first story is in July, but researching it even before then. And yes, I was contacted by a number of whistleblowers who work in the EPA's Division of New Chemicals, and their job is to make sure that the chemicals are safe before they hit the market. And what they told me in short was that they were facing a lot of pressure to make chemicals seem safer than they actually were. So if they identified hazards, often their managers or supervisors were saying, you need to change that, or they were challenging their assessments. And they were sometimes, even if they refused to change them, the assessments were being changed without their knowledge or their permission. So this was not just one occasion, but a bunch. And they ended up filing complaints with the EPA Inspector General. And then after a while, they came to me and told me their story in short and shared documents with me. So, and I should say they shared their accounts with me and the Inspector General and occasionally some members of Congress.
So I'm curious, were these whistleblowers all working together, or was this happening sort of on an individual basis?
So sometimes they were working together, and there were. I spoke with 5, and several of them did work together as colleagues in this division. All but one, I believe, have since been moved out, and that's part of the alarming thing that we've seen is that they called attention to this and basically lost their positions within the agency. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say within the agency, they lost their positions with the division. They were kind of moved to other positions in the EPA. And part of what's been really troubling and problematic is, they submitted not just, again, to me, but to the Inspector General. And these are these big documents that they've shared with us that include screenshots of emails that they are, reports being edited, all sorts of evidence. And I've also interviewed them for hours and hours and hours. So these are not allegations that have been made lightly. They're really well documented. And in fact, in my last story, I actually included some of the actual documents before I've done just kind of screenshots or little bits of them. In this last story, I think I included 4 of the documents to give a sense of the kind of how much information is in there, how detailed it is, and how these are not kind of, oh, my boss told me to change something. It's, on this day, I wrote that it was based on this chemical, which I'm, the structure, which is like this, and and it has these particular known effects, and its closest, relative. It's incredibly detailed, and you can look in the last piece. Again, I've linked them at the bottom, where you can really see, wow, these are serious charges. So the inspector general is still considering these allegations, is reviewing them. And part of what's really difficult and strange about this story is that basically, as I mentioned, the people who made the allegations have been removed from their positions, but the people who are at the center of these incidents that are really well described remain in their positions, except one of them left. And so it's really a very delicate situation over there.
So I have a couple questions, and maybe you can just bring them all into one. The whistleblowers, I assume these are scientists.
Yes, they're all PhD scientists, toxicologists for the most part, but people who have expertise in chemistry and biochemistry and toxicology.
Now, they're the people who they were, they're the people they were reporting to. Were they political? Or are they managers? Or were they also scientists?
They're also scientists. Some of them are they're higher up. One of them was the science advisor. Another one is sort of the director above them in that division.
Now, I assume that this may have, I just assume, but I could be wrong. So please prove me wrong. This is sort of a shift that happened over Trump. This sort of, the way he gutted the EPA, as we know. So I'm curious. This seems, listen, the EPA is not perfect, as we all know, but this seems a little jarring.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that there was this really intense shift at the EPA during the Trump administration. And it was a little bit, I think of it as sort of a standing on its head. You had people from the industries who were regulated, pretty much running the actual, in each department. You had the people from, who used to represent the air polluters running the air division and such. And a lot of the problems did intensify, the problems that I'm describing here. And obviously, I should just say this is a really redacted document. Yeah. And we tried to, some of them are less redacted, but there are pieces that we couldn't make public. But so there was an intensification under Trump, and that's absolutely true. But what I've been writing about has all been since. And so these problems have continued, the problems of kind of, again, sort of making these changes and feeling this pressure at the behest of industry. And I would say that the people at the heart of the matter that have been there for years and years. So it's really, there weren't Trump appointees. It was just an intensification of pressure during the past administration that has not been resolved.
And did the people, the folks who were brought in by Trump, who were part of the industries that they were supposed to be regulating, are they still at the EPA?
Well, so the political appointees for the most part left. Yeah. So that was, and you see that with every change of administration, the whoever's in charge, the president brings in his own folks. And generally speaking, you've got, especially with, the Trump administration, it was really, I think, the most extreme from what I understand in terms of industry representation, for sure. And most of those folks are gone. Yes. But in this part, this new chemicals part, and the part of the EPA that looks at both new and old chemicals, it's one of the divisions that's really struggled to kind of maintain its integrity, because what it's doing is regulating an intensely powerful and profitable industry, right? And whether your chemical comes onto the market or not, and what restrictions it has, matters a lot to the manufacturers, right? And often what happens is, if the manufacturers aren't happy, if their chemical is not getting approved, or is not getting approved as quickly as they'd like it to, what happens, and I've reported on this in the second and third pieces of this, I believe, series, is that they'll call in their elected officials and they'll say, hey, can you reach out to to the EPA and make sure my chemical gets moved along. And these, in this case, and we've got a lot of documentation in this, I believe it's the second story, about that internally they call these hair on fire cases. And so hair on fire is when like, oh, we got to get to this right now because someone's pissed, right? And so we have this audio recording in there. I don't know if you can actually play when we're on the air, but you can hear the consultant. They brought in a consultant to kind of redo their internal software, and they wanted to basically include a green button, a single button that would make it possible for the managers to basically override the concerns of the scientists with a single button, right? And this is in hair on fire cases. And here, when you're scrolling here, right there, that if you look closely, that green is HOF duty. That's hair on fire duty. And what that was is like a rotating, some manager was always in charge of hair on fire because some companies at any point will come and be mad and say, you guys got to get on this, you got to move. Well, the hair on fire duty person was responsible for those cases. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
let's play this. I think we can play it. David, we're able to, right?
Yeah, try.
So going back to the flags again, sure. Is there a way to override it all? So for example, say there are 9 open discussions, but then we suddenly had to expedite a case due to some hair on fire situation. Do we need 9 people to go in and close out these discussions for it to move forward? Or is there an all-powerful person like can come in and override everything?
And then let's play the second one.
Yes, we'd like a button or something, and then we'll assign whoever that person or persons may be to override everything.
Okay, override meaning that this turns to green.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So does that make sense?
Yes. and does this I'm just curious, like, are these chemical companies that get their people in, is there a lot? I mean, I am very confused about just like how the process of this, I get it in Congress, it's obvious, but how is the process of this really carried out fully, especially since this is an agency that has a lot of long time, folks who've been working there and they have their own, cultural norms. I imagine that there's been a lot of friction internally.
Well, I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. This whole series is really, it is about this friction. It's about these internal disputes. The problem is that the EPA has kind of treated this as like an internal dispute, right? That this is like, okay, we have 2 different, 2 employees who are disagreeing with one another, right? But PEER, which is it's an environmental organization that is representing the whistleblowers in this case, is really arguing the point that it's not really just he said, she said, or he said, thing. These are incredibly well documented cases. For instance, the audio that you just heard that lays out with pretty incontrovertible evidence this pattern of influence, right? And so it's not just about like, oh, I believe this and you believe that, and it's a sort of, you could go either way, scientific point. It's actually something bigger. And so the dispute that's kind of happening now, I think, is that PEER really wants the folks who are named in these disclosures and in the incidents they've described to me, they want them out of their positions, right? Because they want this influence to stop, and they don't feel like it has. And I think EPA feels like we really need to hear the inspector generals. We want to hear what they say before we do anything to change personnel, right? And so you can see it's like a pretty meaty dispute. And what the whistleblowers would say and have said to me is like, the reason that they came forward, and I should say that they came forward at real risk to themselves. And it has been a very bumpy ride for them. They've lost their positions, and they've been public. They actually wanted me to use their names, and I did. And so now you can Google them, you can find them. And everyone in the agency knows who they are. Yeah. And that's like a really intense thing to do. And why would anyone do that? And I've asked them, why would you do this? It's because they really felt like there was danger to the public health, that we are breathing these things, and that they felt like they had to stop it. And that, these are people who went to the EPA because they really were concerned about protecting people from chemicals. And they were lying awake at night feeling that they knew something was happening and that it really had huge consequences, and that they needed to come forward out of like an obligation, And so when you look at, some of the chemicals we're talking about, in one case, it's like a paint, and so there's a spray paint that is about half of, it's by weight, half of this product is a known carcinogen. And the folks, the whistleblowers, wanted to be able to mention that in the assessment, that basically half of this stuff is this known carcinogen. And it's a well-established carcinogen that's been recognized by the state of California. And they ended up the manager said, no, you that's not the way you do it. And they said, okay, well, they were debating this sort of process point, and they said, okay, we can't do it this way. Can we alert people another way? No, you can't do that either. And so it's this really feeling like, oh my gosh, we have this consequential, really important information, and we're trying, it's our job to alert the public, and we can't. And so I think that's when you end up with this situation where people really put themselves in this terrible spot, personally and professionally, to get this message out. And I think I mentioned I started my first piece in this series was in July. It's in March. It's March now. So for the better part of a year, they've been kind of dangling and under this really intense pressure, and this is not resolved. And the people who they've named and brought attention, to their actions remain in place. So it's a very difficult situation.
And let's talk about the Inspector General. Who is this? How are they appointed, or how do they earn this position? And when do we expect to report back?
I've asked them when they expect to report back, and they won't tell me. And they won't make this kind of thing public. There's just no response. But presumably they've had them for a long time. I hope that answer is coming soon. And I mean, I should say that in the meantime, the EPA has made some changes, and I did do a piece about that as well. I think it's maybe 4 or 5, but where they've made some structural changes, added some positions, created a position and created 2 kind of bodies within the agency that will be paying attention to the scientific integrity in these areas and trying to check on it. And I feel like these are good steps. But it seems like it's, here, right. So this lays out some of the changes that they made.
This is an article, just for the audio. It's EPA plans to clean up troubled chemicals and pesticide programs. It's an article. It's part 5 of the series. I'm curious. Did any of the companies or the chemicals associated maybe with specific companies, do they respond? Have they acted out? Is there any sort of acknowledgement of this?
It's such a good question, and the answer is complicated and weird because well, it is, because you would think, so I mentioned the paint chemical. That chemical is not made specifically by one company. It's kind of an old chemical that's been around for a long time. And all the products that they're assessing, that they're writing about in these disclosures, complaints to the IG, right? They're all submitted to the EPA as confidential business information.
Oh, boy.
And if the whistleblowers were to reveal any of this confidential business information, they would be at an even greater threat. Like they could face criminal penalty.
Wow.
So I don't know the names of the products or of the companies that make them. I can only say a lot about them, the type, as much as I can, which is why when you see these redacted documents, and it's one of the reasons it's been kind of bananas to report on this, because there's so much you can't say legally.
Right.
But to take a couple of steps back and think about this is how we remain so in the dark. So much of chemical regulation has really been just locked down by the companies who are very involved in writing the regulations, right? They're lobbyists and folks. So CBI is a big deal at EPA, and by law, they cannot reveal. Oh, CBI, meaning confidential business information, is a very big deal at EPA. And it makes it so hard as a reporter to write about these things in a way that anyone understands, right? Because so we and also to check up on it, right? What is this product and who is being exposed? Well, I can't even, this is really, I want to talk about that screenshot in a sec, but it's so hard to figure out because it's all confidential and locked down. When you try to look up, okay, how much of this is produced and where? And I've gone through this database so many times. How much is produced? CBI. Name of the facility, CBI, amount, CBI, or like, just what it's used for, CBI, whether it's exported, CBI, so we don't know. And so in cases like the case of the paint I talked about, that's, we do know that people are being exposed. The extent to which a lot of these other things, we're exposed to these other things, it's a big black box. Although I should say some of the chemicals we know are emitted at manufacturing plants where we know that the people surrounding the plants generally are low income and folks. Do you want to bring that screenshot?
Before we get to that, just for a second, because on that topic, is there any scenario in which, I assume you're not a lawyer or not, practice anything related to this, but I'm curious, like, because some of this stuff was released, some of this was, through your reporting has been leaked. Could you imagine a scenario in which they can at least prove that there's been an immediate sickness due to use of these products? Obviously cancer is a complicated thing. You can't necessarily target, but maybe there is something like if somebody's a painter and they're using this one paint or whatever, that there could be potentially a lawsuit against the government for not regulating it when they were consciously aware.
Well, I can imagine it, but it's so hard. And, not only the confidentiality stuff I talked about, but another thing I've reported on quite a bit is the relationship between cancers and exposures and in situations like in cancer clusters. It is so hard to definitively prove a link between exposure and illness under the best of circumstances.
And Love Canal, there's always precedent.
Right. But that was a humongous struggle that took years and years and years and years. So, which isn't to say, there are a lot of cases happening now, and particularly, with pesticides. You see there are Roundup cases with, there certainly are, but it's a huge lift.
Right. So let's go back to there was this health. Here we go. It's a human health summary. Is it possible to zoom in on that a little bit, David, just so we can read a little bit closer? I have to put my glasses on.
Yeah. Okay. So the part, perfect. Oh, a little down. Yeah. So if you go down a little bit, right. So it says, based on the hazard determination and available quantitative and qualitative risk information, EPA concludes that and then did not identify risk for a chemical substance. So it was actually, let me go down to the later part, and I'm going to bear with me for a second, but it's a really fascinating edit. So what we're looking at here is track changes in in the assessment of a chemical. Perfect. That's perfect the way you have it. Okay. And so the original, so what's in black and then what was eventually struck out was written by a scientist who authored this assessment, right? And what they end up saying is absorption of this chemical, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. And they talk about absorption through the lungs, moderate through the GI tract, through the skin, blah, blah, blah. For the new chemical substance, sorry. All right. So this is the one that's the car paint, right? So the new chemical substance contains more than half of this thing. And it says, which they call here the residual component. For the residual component, EPA identified dermal sensitization and systemic effects and cancer as hazards. Okay, so we've got dermal sensitization, systemic, which is lung, kidney, liver, and adrenal gland effects, and cancer are the three hazards, right? EPA identified, okay, we don't need to worry about that. And then it says, and then the last sentence is, EPA qualitatively evaluated a dermal sensitization, and then all that struck out, and in its place, it just says, for the new chemical substance, EPA did not identify a hazard. So we've said, the original said that it had systemic effects, right, on the lung, on the kidney, right, and on the adrenal gland and cancer, right? And now it says it didn't identify a hazard. And so imagine it's your job. It's your job, to protect the public from the health effects of hazardous chemicals. That's your job, right? That's what you've gone to school for many years to do. That's what you want to do with your life. And that's what you get up every morning in the day to do, right? And you do what you are supposed to do according to your job description, and you lay that out. And then you go to bed thinking you've written that, and you wake up to realize that someone scratched out your work and said, no, there's no hazard.
It's even a form of dignity. It's not even, I mean, obviously there's a public health issue, and there are people whose jobs might be to paint every day and aren't even aware of the risks, or they might be using one paint or another because they think it's a little safer. But this person wakes up dedicated to doing this, and it's dignity too. I can imagine it's quite a gut punch.
Right. And so you mentioned the person who's going to paint. You know, one of the frustrations is very hard to actually ban a chemical. Is very a rare thing, right? But what happens at the very least is that, you know, if a paint is a carcinogen, you might get at least a label saying this is carcinogenic. And maybe if you're working in, let's say, a car detailing shop, which is one of the places that uses this kind of stuff, you might wear a mask, but you're not going to do it if you don't know that it's a problem. And so, yeah. I
mean, what's so fascinating about this work, though, is on one hand, it's very hard to prove where cancer comes from and what specifically caused a cancer. But on the other hand, reading the details of what they're reporting, like they're very clearly reporting on the effects of these chemicals and specific, it's just, I'm actually with specificity that I'm kind of surprised by.
Yeah, it is super specific. And some of these documents that I get are, 40 pages. They're they're only I'm super condensing them because, one, it's incredibly hard to understand just because it's so detailed. But yeah, no, this is, as I said, it's not sort of off the cuff. These allegations aren't lightly made.
So do you have much more in the series, or are you continuing? I assume, sometimes when you report on these things, more people come out and come forward, but.
Yeah, I probably will. Yes. And I, again, eagerly await the IG's findings. In the meantime, as there is more information, I'll put it out, and people I desperately want to be fair to everybody involved in this situation. and I know that a lot of people at EPA are doing are trying to right a ship that was like upside down, but I really feel like, to the extent that this is still going on, it needs to be addressed immediately. And I feel, of course, for the whistleblowers, but I feel more for the rest of us who, it really shakes the confidence in our federal government to read these things. And, as I have really thoroughly, it makes me, feel really sad and unsure. I have very little confidence right now about the ability of our government to protect us from these things.
Great thing to go into the weekend with. No, I mean, come on. This is, I imagine you're also under pressure as well. I mean, being an investigative reporter is not easy. Have you had anybody retaliate, the government respond? Is anybody or any of the I can't even imagine the companies that you haven't listed them, but has there been any sort of response to your piece from anybody in government or otherwise?
Well, I mean, the EPA has, again, made some changes, and I think this is just very contentious stuff. I've heard from a lot of people, and I have heard from some other people who left EPA and feel that, I've got a lot of emails that are that's the tip of the iceberg kind of a thing. And then I've heard from people saying EPA is, they're trying, and it's systematically what they have to do, their job in terms of regulating a tremendous industry and trying to, there are more chemicals, there are more than 40,000 chemicals in use. And they're like this little underfunded agency trying to make sense of it. And it is beyond daunting. And I very much get that. But I think ultimately, for the people who care about this stuff, who act, as much as these parts of the EPA are really in battle right now, I think that most of the leadership at EPA wants to do the right thing, I think, and to clean this up. So I remain hopeful, and which isn't exactly what you asked me, but I'm happy to do the work, and don't worry about me.
Don't worry about it. Sharon Lerner, thank you so much for doing this work. It's worrisome, but you got to do the work, and this is how hopefully we'll reform these things. But really appreciate your time and your patience with my voice. You can check out Sharon Lerner's multi-part series. It's 8 right now, 8 parts, I believe. It's in the Intercept. It's titled EPA Exposed. We'll put it up on a link, in all the comment sections of all the different platforms we're on. So you can take a look at them. There's documents there. There's recordings. It's a really fascinating series. And thank you, Sharon, for doing us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Feel better.
Thank you.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
All right, everybody. I am grateful that we were able to put something together today. I drank some hot tea right beforehand, and I think it helped a bit. But if you're not, I'm supposed to do a plug. I forgot. Tomorrow, Saturday, if you are in the New York area, I am going to be joining the Majority Report at the Bell House. Sam Cedar's doing a live show. Very excited. That's why I need to rest up my voice right now, because that's going to be in less than 24 hours. So hoping that it works, but it'll be really exciting. I'm going to be on with Senator Gustavo Rivera, who's an old friend, who actually inspired me to first go report in Puerto Rico, which I just got back from. So that'll be a fun little conversation. He also was one of the first people I ever spoke to about Andrew Cuomo probably a decade ago. And I was, really, it really woke me up. It was probably the beginning of his first administration. So it'll be a great conversation. Of course, Sam will be there in the whole report. So if you can't check it out, I think the tickets are sold out. So if you do have tickets, I'll see you there. All right, everybody, stay safe, be well, and stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.